Greetings, aliens. This is TJ, and you are watching Studio Sessions with Astronoize. Today's video is going to be a little bit of basic sound design, as you can see from the title. What we're going to use for our synth is Serum. It's just graphical. It's pretty close to massive, which is what I got pretty proficient in using, and it's easy to explain. So I'm just gonna kind of go over the features that are in most synthesizers. I don't want to dive too deep. This one's gonna be pretty basic. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get started. We just got a default patch here. I just, just a factory default. It's just gonna be like a saw wave basically, and right, nothing special. That's what it sounds like. So let's start at the top here. There's several different types of synthesis. I can't remember what this one is called. I think additive, because you're adding oscillators together to make a sound, to make an overall sound. But with Serum, you have three different oscillators, and that's generally how most synths are laid out. You got, at least two. Most of the time around like three. This one's got a sub, which you can pitch it up or down, so it doesn't have to be a sub, but you stack these oscillators to make your own unique sounds. So this is a saw wave. Let's go ahead and bring in oscillator B here, and it's another saw wave, but let's go up 7 semitones to make just like a 2-note little chord out of it, and listen to this now. Right, so you got two oscillators stacked on top of each other, the same saw wave that are stacking together to make a more unique sound than just the one oscillator. Right, so that's generally how additive synthesis works. I hope that's correct. But yeah, you're adding stuff together. So let's add a sub in there now, and again another saw wave, and let's pitch this one down a little bit, and it'll give it a more darker tone to it. You hear that? Hear the difference there? Sounds cool. So yeah, Serum is pretty crazy because it comes with so many different waveforms, as did Massive, but I feel like Serum kind of trumps Massive, honestly. This is what I've been using a lot of lately. It's got so many different waveforms to choose from, and these are all going to give a different timbre to your sound. Right, so I could endlessly just flip through these and, just kind of discover new sounds that way. But yeah, basically, you're going to just choose whatever waveform. I particularly like saws, and you just stack them together, sometimes kind of detune them. We'll get more in depth on all these weird controls. I just want to go over the basics today. But yeah, the first section that you should pay attention to on most synthesizers, all of them pretty much are going to have this. It depends on how many oscillators they have, but they're going to have an oscillator section with, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know. It depends on the synth you have. Moving on. Next section over here is the filtering. So just with these little notes over here just means that it's going to filter oscillator A, oscillator B, the noise section right here, which is kind of like another oscillator. It just adds like white noise, little little hiss sound to the top of it. We'll get more on that later. And this is your sub. Basically, these switches in Serum just mean the filter is going to affect all of them, because if you had some of them unselected, then that's going to pass through the filter untouched, basically. I like to let's just, for demonstration purposes, see what's going on in our filter. Let's turn them all on. And now let's take a listen. Right, so it's filtering the sound. Right now we have a low pass filter. It's letting the lows pass through and filtering the highs, also known as a high cut. You got a little resonance, which in Serum, it's got this little graph here. It's excellent. It shows you what a resonance is. So more resonance means you're going to have a little peak right before the filter cutoff. So let's listen to what that does. You hear that little whistly, like resonant sound. Excellent. Depending on the type of sound you're crafting, more resonance sounds, you know, kind of funky, kind of weird. Yeah, so that's what that does. Don't want to go too much more in depth drives, just like overdrive fat, just makes the width of it sound a little bit fatter, I guess. Moving on, let's turn that off. Again, let's take a listen. This noise is like another oscillator that just generates white noise. And in Serum, it's got so many different kinds of white noise. I don't want to bore you with all this, but I found out that I like the sound of this ARP white one. Let's listen to this. Right, so it's just like the static on your TV sound, just the little white noise burst, little hiss on top of it, which adds excellent clarity and more depth and more grit, and makes your synths actually kind of pop out of the mix more. And in Serum, it's awesome because you can adjust the pitch. You can make it sound brighter or darker depending on the needs for your sound design needs for the particular track you're working on. So once you got all these things stacked up, let's add the sub, and we got some noise in there. You can see how you can start adding all these things together, and the options are literally endless. You can just go on for days and days and days, just kind of like flipping through and seeing what kind of combinations you want to make your own unique synth sound. And don't be afraid, you know. Some people like to use presets, which I'm guilty of sometimes too. Sometimes I'm lazy. Sometimes it's not even about laziness. Sometimes I just want to be inspired by a pre-made sound, and that's cool. But dive in here, make your own unique sounds, and then just go click this little save button up here. You got your own preset. Then for future tracks, you already got your own sound that nobody has. Go, you know, dive in, mess with these oscillators, adjust them, kind of start tweaking this. I'll make a video so you can see what these actually really do later, but start crafting your own sound. And that's just the oscillator section there. Mind you, a little bit of filtering. Let's take a listen again. Right? Sounds pretty cool. So the last thing I kind of want to go over is envelopes. And in Serum, envelope 1 just controls your oscillators. You can probably route it differently in the matrix somehow. I haven't messed around with that, but envelope 1, just know it routes, like all your oscillators route through this one by default. So when you adjust these parameters, it's going to adjust the attack. There's a little hold that's not as common, but more on that later. Decay, sustain, and release. ADSR is your normal, what you're generally going to see on every synth. Get to know these well. So attack just means how quickly this graph represents your oscillator is going to respond. So a quick one is immediately, and then I'll adjust it. Listen to this. Right, so if you want a more like sucking, like delayed, almost kind of like a sweep, or you know, kind of evolving, not just instant plucky sound, then dial back your attack time, right? And so I'm gonna skip this hold for now, but let's move on to decay, sustain, release. Decay, I'm gonna turn this sustain down so we can hear the difference on the decay first. Decay just means after the pluck, how quickly it decays back down to your sustain level, which in this case is set to 0. So if my sustain was up, then you wouldn't hear much of a difference in the decay level, right? But I'm going to just put it down for this purpose. Let's listen to this. Shorter decay, more plucky sound. Longer decay, more of a sustained, like longer held note. It just takes almost like there's reverb on it, if you will, is an easy way to picture that. And then sustain means how much of the how much of the note is being held, basically. How do I word this? While the note is on. So if I extend this note out right here and turn the sustain up, it's gonna play the whole time basically at this level while the note is held. But once the note is off, then the release comes into play, and we'll take a listen to this. Right? So with the sustain down, it's not going to hold that note. It's going to, as soon as the attack is off, it's going to start to decay. And let's turn that decay down. Right? Hear the difference? So sustain just means however long your note is, it's going to sustain it for whatever volume you set it to. Okay? So let's turn this sustain up again, and then your release. So this just means after the note is off, the end of the note, there's no more note left, how many milliseconds in this case, it takes for the sound to just get back to zero. So 15 milliseconds is pretty short, almost instantaneous. Whereas if I turn this up to, let's say, a second, it's going to take a long time to decay, even after that note is done for, right? Hear that? So now you can adjust these parameters to kind of fit in with whatever kind of sound you're going for. You're going for a plucky one, you're going for a held note, you're going for a more slow evolving sound. So now, knowing what these controls do, you can kind of tailor your sound to fit the needs of your song. Or in some instances, you can just tweak around in just a sound design session to try and come up with something crazy, but you know what the purpose of each one of these does. And the hold, I don't want to go too much into that, but as you can see from the graph, it just holds the note. It's almost like a sustain before the sustain, if that makes any sense, right? Just kind of holds the note down a little bit longer before the decay actually kicks in. It's like a second sustain is the best way to explain it. So let's go for a little more plucky sound, and I'll show you something to do with the filter section next. So I'm just going to let this play and kind of tweak these parameters. Check it out. Cool, got a nice plucky saw type sound. Let's add some filter on it, and I want to make it like a sharper. So I went in here and I just went from like a 12 band low pass. I'm not sure how you say that, but anyways, I went up to 24. That's just going to be a steeper curve here. Let's go a little less resonance, turn up some drive and fatness, and turn this cutoff down. And let's take another envelope, go to the cutoff, and let's adjust the parameters on this, because what this envelope is basically saying is it's going to give me the attack, sustain, decay, and release of this modulator I put on the cutoff. So let's, to bring in a little more pluckiness into the filter section, let's adjust these parameters and check this out. Right, so that just makes it to where your filter is not just so static. Your filter actually has, your filter actually has its own envelope, its own plucky sounding envelope too. So that means you can turn your envelope down, and instead of just cutting out all these highs and it just sounding very static and plain, it's gonna pluck a little bit of highs in it, and then slowly, depending on your settings, go back to wherever you set the initial cutoff frequency to be. So listen again. I don't know how to exactly bypass it, but anyways, yeah, you get the point there. That's what if you understand attack, sustain, decay, release, uh, it can affect your oscillator sound, and then you can set envelopes to the filter. You can set envelopes to the noise level. You can have this envelope add a little more pluck into the noise. Right? So the kind of sky's the limit on that one. That's up to you to go crazy with. And that's all I really want to. That's like your basics, your three basics that if you learn that, you can kind of navigate around almost any synth, additive synth that is. There is FM synthesis, and I'm sure other kinds, which FM just kind of confuses me. I need to dive into that more. More on that later. Anyways, if you understand these three basic concepts, you can kind of navigate around a synth. Again, your oscillator section, you're just stacking different types of oscillators, saws, triangles, this weird addy funk, depending on what kind of synth you're using. Different combinations. Sky's the limit. I mean, if you can imagine, you could do so many different combinations and come up with such a unique sound that's all yours, right? Oscillator section that usually gets fed into some sort of filtering section, and sometimes you need a high pass or a band pass or whatever. That's up to you there. Then you got some sort of noise. This adds that just little burst of kind of TV like white noise, the sound on top. Excellent for cutting through the mix, messing around with that. And then last but not least is your ADSR section, your envelope basically. Usually you got a main one being your first envelope that controls the oscillators. And then from then you got a couple other ones that you can kind of shape. You can make different shapes out of them and just set them to the different parameters of whatever you want to control. And from there, sky's the limit. Just mess around and just get used to your synth and all the different oscillators sound like. And once you got that, you're going to be making some pretty unique sounds. I believe that. So dive in, get used to it. Don't be scared. And until next time, make some music. Peace.